Hey, it's Chris, Liege Games. What are we talking about today? Foxpaw! Harry Potter, the worker placement game, if you will. You want your wizarding, you want your sorting hat, you want all of your dynamic events that you can get alongside of things. Well, we're trying to see how well that ports to the tabletop today. Well, what does Godot Games has for us? Well, they send me the prototype. Let's talk. You ready? Let me tell you everything you need to know, whether or not this is right for you, my thoughts and opinions on it so far. Let's go. Harry frickin' Potter! The worker placement game, like I said, right? This is potentially a 1 to 5 player game. There is expansion content that is going to some way, in shape or form, offer a solo mode, modularity, as well as a 5th player that is at least listed currently. But the main core of the game is for 2 to 4 players is what you've got, sort of set up in front of you, in front of me. And so what you're doing is you're taking one of your workers and you're placing them in the various places throughout the castle to get your resources, to gather your spells, to wizard duel, to outfox the teachers, as well as maybe go to bed on time or maybe do a little midnight mischief. Along the way, you'll be gathering your mystic creatures, you'll be gathering mischief and prophecy cards, and trying to score house points in order to actually score the victory points that are necessary to win. And you're going to be doing that over, well, in your first game, potentially 4 rounds, but a typical game length is going to be 5 rounds with 4 phases each as you're going along. So like I said, you need victory points in order to win. Victory points are actually established by these little paw tokens, which will be at the bottom of the board track. Similarly, you're going to have star tokens. These are your house points, if you will, if you're familiar with Harry Potter. 20 points for Gryffindor, 10 points for Slytherin. I'm more of at least in my Harry Potter game on my phone, I'm Slytherin. Anyway, side tangent there. So what you're going to be doing at the beginning of the game, before we get into the 4-phase system over these rounds, and one of these phases may only occur during rounds or after rounds 2, 4, and 5, you are going to actually be sorted into your magical school. And so what you do at the beginning of this game is you get 2 character cards in the form of things that look like this. And when you get 2 of them, you get to flip them over and you see that each of them have different numbers of schools at the bottom. And so these are going to correlate with your starting resource card, which is then going to be given to you of how many of each of these resources. You've got your hearts, which isn't actually your health there. You've got your starting resources here of the 3 resources that are available in the game, the little boxes, components, your little plants for brewing magical herbs and potions, and then your money, your energy. You have also the wand that you start off with there, broom, and then you start off with any magical beasts and prophecy cards. And so what you do is you go in turn order based on the number down here in the lower right hand corner, and then based on the 4 that are in the base game, you get to choose one of them that potentially corresponds to one of your 2 hero cards, or character cards, if you will, that you're going to be allocated at the beginning of the game. But you don't have to, because this is the tricky point, right? If you choose one of your 3, essentially thematically incorporated, that is following your parents' footsteps into the wizarding world, even if you're a muggle, and you get the bonus of 2 extra starting gold and 2 extra of the stars that I mentioned. But if you do not start with that, you don't get those bonuses, but you get 2 instead of just 1 regular of the school abilities. And all of the school abilities also fall on these cards that are going to be very handy to remember, because otherwise you're not going to remember them. On one side, the skill of 1 if you go with the house tradition, and on the other side you flip it over and you see each of the 2 skills, and all 4 of these are really asymmetric, so you don't have to worry about them being any significant overlap there. Then you allocate your player board, and we'll pull one up for you so you can kind of see what this looks like. And this is keeping track of all your stats in a dual layer situation. And you can see your hearts are over here. You've got your little strength token. You've got your little knowledge token. You've got your energy that moves along this way. You've got your little spy tokens up here. any of your mythical beasts that you're going to gather as workers, which will, be available, but as you use them, they will also disappear. And then you've got your workers to go along with that. And, the fire actually has the potential for 2 of these workers, so they actually have 2 little meeples. And then this is your dueling wand, which is going to take place as well on a round by round basis. And so you're going to be keeping track of all of your stats that way, because you're going to need energy for a lot of these activities. The other 3 stats are going to go along for some of the other things you need to buy. If you need certain strength in order to play Quidditch, if you will, to ride your broom. You need certain knowledge to cast spells or to get a better wand, and so on and so forth. And so then the main core, after you've done that, is broken into the 4-phase system, like I mentioned. And the main part of that actually is just taking those workers that I just showed you and taking all 4 of them. And maybe if you start with a mythic beast as 2, 5. And then just placing them down into these areas on the map here. If I actually move the victory points and the house points out of the way randomly on the track, because I'm not actually scoring right now during the game, but you're going to have this broken down into like 3 or 4 main areas on the board. Working on our left, all the way over here, we actually have all of the resource spots, essentially. The spots that are going to get you resources. They're also going to cost you, because you're going to have to potentially pay a penalty on a lot of these spots as well. In the upper left-hand corner here, you can see that these are represented by sunshines. Sunshine there, sunshine here, and then sunshine right down here. And these worker placement spots tell you the requirement in the spot themselves. So, you need to pay your resources in order to get it, or you have this little skull and crossbones, if you can see that there. And you can see, a side note here, all of the various iconography that's present on here. And the skull and crossbones in this case is a darkness card. So darkness cards we'll talk about in a second, but they are represented by these. They're basically negative effects that you're slowly gathering as you take more actions or stronger actions, but then they're also going to be able to be gotten rid of by potentially the dueling that goes on right here in the dueling grounds, which we'll talk about in a second. So then you're going to be getting these resources that are listed to the left of these, whether that's prophecy cards or your mystical beast cards or your spy tokens or even the star house points. And so you get to place them wherever you want, and you get the suns immediately. That is the main portion of the suns. But then the middle of the board is also going to be where you're going to get some of those stats that I mentioned, the strength and the knowledge in order to do these. And these are a little bit weird, and so I better explain this right now of how you're doing this. And so when you place a worker in a spot in that area, you'll notice that there are 2 other spots below me. And so the first person that gets it gets a gold, and then I have to pay whatever energy that I want, potentially 1, but equal to the number of spots total at me and below that are empty. So if I wanted to just pay 1 energy and there was no one below me, I would get 1 strength on my player board that I just showed you. However, if there was no one below me and all 3 spots were blank, I could pay 3 energy and get 3 strength. But if someone is below me and I've got my red worker here on the first spot and my white worker, well then red can only pay 1 energy, white could actually play 2. So potentially coming in a little bit different there could change your dynamic in these resource spots. And similarly then, after you've laid all your workers down, you skip over the immediate gratification side of things and the resource management, like I mentioned, of your plants and your monies and your bags as you're starting resources. You then move into this center grid, because you'll notice that there are arrows in the middle of this telling you go, okay, from here to here to here to here to here. And this bottom one here is actually really important, because you'll notice right here that this is the bedroom, and the bedroom, it then also correlates to the mischief down here in the lower right hand corner. And you get the option at the end, because you have to place one of your workers in one of these 2 areas. The higher you go here, the more bonus you're going to get in terms of the hearts, which is your reputation, because your reputation can take a hit. But you'll also get 6 energy. And like I said, energy is probably the most important resource over, all of the other resources that I just showed you. More than anything else, because it plays into almost everything else you're going to do, including the last 2 areas I'll show you in a minute. And because you get that, it also then changes the turn order. This becomes the turn order for the next round. So you move these little turn order icons around to the order in which your workers are on these places. So that matters, because every single freaking tiebreaker in this game is based off of the bedtime, the sleeping order, or the turn order. And so it's really important. Sleep is really important, right? I don't know anything about that. But then the Mischief over here, essentially, you get a Mischief card, which are these, variable bonus cards, essentially. Anything from discarding your monster and getting a new one, choosing a player to cause them to skip their next worker placement turn, not lose it, but just get it skipped. Casting a spell for free, immediately placing your guy or your spy marker, getting a spy marker in general, swap 5 resources, draw cards equal to the number of players, give each of them to a player of your choice. So there is a lot of potential take that with these Mischief cards, right? Harry Potter style, Weasley twins. This is the Weasley twin powers activate deck, if you will. And it's also going to be one of the main cruxes in a minute when we talk about pros and cons, whether or not you're going to like that aspect of a worker placement Euro style in general, how much interaction is too much for you in that regard. Then the last 2 spots up here, you'll see that we have a teacher spot and then the spell spot. And if you put one in here, you then go over to the right side of the board here, which is off camera. I'll move it back a second. And you're going to be casting spells, learning spells. Spells get you stars. House points get you victory points. And there's a few other ways to get these victory points, including the duels, as well as the house competitions. And the house competitions are the last element of things that we're going to talk about after the teachers here. Because the teachers, for example, are going to be another different dynamic, because all those bad negative cards that I just said you're going to be having to draw that are going to give you bad effects, and you're going to have to deal with them, because if you have the most of them at the end of the game, you're going to lose victory points. Well, they're also going to cause problems if you or allow you to change those dueling aspects that I alluded to earlier but have not talked about. And so they allow you to discard them if you can, do that effect when you're dueling. And so we'll talk about what that looks like, but you can mitigate that to a degree. But going back to the teachers for a second here, the teachers will have houses listed at the bottom of them, and they'll tell you, okay, just like in Harry Potter, you have certain teachers that are, well, you can become the teacher's pet for, or certain teachers that are aligned with certain houses and hate other houses. Severus. Anyway, so in this case, what happens is you can see 0 bad card, this house. So if you're this house on this round, you do not draw the bad cards when you should otherwise. However, if you're this house, Adama Crest hates this house, and you actually draw 2 instead of just 1. And there are ways on the lower left-hand corner of that sunshine area that I mentioned that allow you actually to manipulate this deck and shuffle it around, because you'll do that on a round-by-round basis anyway, but it allows you to get through it faster, especially if it's not one that's good for you. Now, the last 2 things here, before we get to the dueling, which is the whole other big aspect of things we'll talk about because that happens every round, are the house events and the spell casting. We'll go through the house events in a second, but the spell casting, when I placed my little worker right here, you can see that then I would hop over to here, and when I would cast my spell, I get to choose what one I want to cast. And I can't actually find the correct pieces, so we'll use one of the spy markers. It'll show up better because the other ones are translucent, but you get to place it on whichever one of these spell indicators you want. Regular spell, super dangerous spell, which means you automatically have to draw one of the bad cards, as you can see kind of down here at the bottom. But what happens, you also get to draw the Mischief card. I don't know if you can see that just off camera, but you get to place it in whichever spot you want. But if you place it in the first spot, you get an extra star. And then this is the reward right here that you're getting. So 3 stars for this spell, 2 stars in a prophecy for this one, and 5 stars for the super dangerous spell. But then these spell cards that are alongside, these are manipulatable. These are changeable. These are, well, manipulatable, like I just mentioned with the teacher cards as well. And they tell you, awkwardly so, because you're actually looking at it like this normally, they tell you what resources are going to cost to cast the spell. So it's going to cost me 4 of the little book boxes, 0 plants, 0 money, and 3 energy. So similarly, right, 2, 2, 2, 0. And then 1, 1, 1, 3. And so there's a huge deck of these spell casting cards to go along with it, and they get mixed and matched and changed as you're going along. But you cannot cast a spell or another one out there, your markers stay out there on that spell being cast until the spell is changed. And it's not changed as frequently as some of the other decks. So you're going to have to manipulate it because that's a main way that you're going to be getting stars, or a fast way to get more potentially as well. The last is you see that you have 3 cards lined up here. And this tells you, okay, when you're going to be doing these. And these are house events. And I've got 2 of them flipped over. Let's just flip over all 3. And so essentially what you're going to be doing is you're going to be either totaling up resources or randomly drawing from a stack of cards which resource is measured in a round by round basis and seeing who has the least. And if you have the least, you are eliminated. And so basically the last one standing. The behemoth, this first spot up here happens after round 2, then the second one happens after round 4, and then the last one happens after round 5 before the end of the game. So behemoth fighting, for example, here, you add up how much energy and how much coinage you have, and whoever has the most gets, well, the first place rewards, which is 2 victory points, not 2 stars, 2 victory points. That's why it's important. Same thing here, 2 victory points, boom, boom. And then it tells you potentially what you're doing and recycling underneath and changing at that point. And then the last one as well, again, where you're going to be looking at these 3 resources and then pulling one of the cards from this individual Tri-Magic deck and saying, okay, which one did I pull? Then whoever has the least of that gets eliminated until there's 1 person left standing. Like I said before, though, if there's a tie, that's where that tiebreaker is. Sleep matters, freaking matters. And so those are the elements of things as a whole. Those are the big picture elements. There is, however, one thing I have to say in this regard. This is Obsidio. This is if you decide to play with 2 players, because it adds a 3rd player element to the board, because this game really needs 3 people. So you have sort of an automa system, a dummy system that will be part of it if you're looking at playing than less than 3 at any point. So what do some of the other cards look like before we go into the pros and cons and my thoughts on things? Well, here are the prophecy cards, for example. This prophecy means you get 2 stars or house points when you get one of your little sneaks out there. And the sneaks, I didn't mention that, but it's a good segue. They allow you to look at what these house events or these, big magical events after rounds 2, 4, and 5 will be, because normally they are face down. So you don't know which ones are going to be which. So you might not know which stat or resource you want to prioritize. And so then you're going to have several like that. You're going to also have ones that'll say, okay, if you get this number of resources, or if you're the 4th in bed or the last person in bed there, if you wizarding duel that direction, and we'll talk about what those are because I haven't talked about that yet. And then again, if you just get certain amount of resources, certain stats just all across the board. And this matters because, again, this is going to be victory points at the end of the game. If you have the most, they're going to get you star house points in the meantime, because also after several of these 5 rounds, whoever has the most star points is also going to earn victory points alongside. So let's talk about the dueling here for a second. The dueling happens every single round. What happens is you flip up one of these cards and it tells you who are the people that are dueling, and then you place their markers out here. So for example, I actually have these 2, and these will correspond a little bit to the energy that you're betting potentially if you're doing one of the Tri-Wizard events or some of the dueling aspects. But essentially what happens is you both gather your wands, and you have 3 different options that you can gather. You can say, we're going to share the reward, you can attack, or you can say, I'm going to withdraw. And so depending on what happens, you can see that you're going to get various rewards. If you both decide to share, wow, we're both going to get a victory point. If you both attack, then you're both going to get stars. If one person attacks right there, one person who's going to get 4 stars and the other person is going to get 0. But if you have any other combination of things, well, you're going to get maybe a prophecy card or not nearly as good. And so what happens then is that plays into the darkness that I mentioned earlier, because if you're in that duel, that's how you lose these, if you select the one that's on there during that round. So if you selected attack right here, you could discard this attack card, and so on and so forth. If you select hold back, you get rid of that one because that one's worth 2 instead. And so then you also have the share. So you're going to be getting rid of these as you acquire them from the board in order to mitigate, because again, most at the end, victory point loss. And then the other aspect of things is if you're not involved in the dueling itself, and they actually have physical wands that are in the box behind me that you're supposed to actually physically do it. You don't have a card. You have to physically say, I'm doing this, or I'm doing this. So you might be wondering then, what happens if you're not in the actual duel and I can't read my darkness cards? Well, what happens to me? Well, you have 3 cards in your hand here. They're going to correlate to the 3 potential outcomes. You have one person winning the duel, you have two people winning the duel, like if they both share or they both hold back, or you have nobody winning. So if you bet correctly, you get resources. And so that's going to be your benefit. And again, those cards are going to rotate. So you'll see not only the different, win conditions or loss conditions there, victory points, prophecy cards, mischief cards all along the way, and all combinations of the houses in addition. And so you're all going to get your turn on the dueling field and doing ha-ha if you want. So one more thing before we get to the pros and cons, you have stats, like I mentioned, that you're upgrading, and these stats come in the form of being able to buy your upgraded wands as well as your upgraded brooms. And you can see the requirements right here. You need to pay that much money and you need to have that much stat. And so what happens with these two elements is you're going to have the level ones. There are 4 of them, levels 1 and 2-ish of the wands and the brooms, and they're going to be sort of around the corners of each of these like that. And then there are going to be the level 3 and 4s underneath. And so then what happens is you just lay them out, and after 2 rounds, then it gets flipped up to the bottom side. And when you buy them, they give you the rewards listed at the bottom. So what you'll have is you'll have like this situation sitting there in front of you. And then if you buy the top one, then the next one, the level 3 and 4, will get flipped up at some point, and you can see the difference between some of those rewards as a whole. So that's what you're going to be doing as another way of scoring stars, victory points, and anything else in between, as well as casting spells. So it gives you lots of those other things that you can do. Now, that being said, pros, cons, thoughts on this. Okay, so the first thing I have to mention is, who is this right for, right? This is a 3 or 4 player worker placement game. If, you're really looking at a 2-player game, you're going to have to do the dummy system. And if you're like me, you don't typically, or you don't always feel like having an AI system that you're having to manage at 2 people. And so for me personally, I am not a huge fan of that, but you need to know how much of an issue that is for you. Now, this board is double-sided depending on the player count. So it's going to be changeable in terms of the number of spots. As you can see on my board, I only had 3 spots for the sleeping. I only had 3 spots for the turn order, but you're going to have a 4-player side as well with a little bit more of everything in that regard. The other pro of this is I didn't show many of them, but you have this variety of monster cards that you're going to be drafting from and getting that all give you asymmetric abilities. Now, I didn't mention this either, is all of these, most of these, have essentially 2 uses. And so once you use them twice, they are gone, and you rotate them in order to indicate that, and then they're gone and you have to re-recruit them. But there is a wide variety, and you have a market of 4 of them sitting out there at any point, and then you get to choose kind of which one you want, and they're all going to give you bonuses, and they're actually really, really cool. And so then that's probably the biggest boon. That's my favorite part of this game. The prophecy cards are probably right behind that with some of the bonuses, again, that you're able to get. But the curse with these as well is it's like, okay, well, end up 4th in this one. I need to be last. Okay, that's not super great. You'd rather the one with dueling. Well, I don't duel for 2 or 3 rounds, and it's someone else. So those dueling cards aren't, my favor. So this one just sits there. The benefit is that it doesn't really get you a negative because you just have to get it done by the end of the game. But you're going to get stars, which are going to be used to score victory points in the earlier rounds. So it does have a little bit of balance, because you can get a couple of those in our last game where you just got a couple in the first round and they just didn't help you and you just couldn't fulfill them, or you needed your maxed out energy and you just couldn't get it, or something like that just was kind of okay. The other thing I liked was the asymmetric powers to go along with each of the schools. You have 2 options, and I like the ability to kind of choose the beginning of game bonus or the skills, but ultimately, I personally feel like the skills are more beneficial. And so because each of these are different, I just worry about balance. And honestly, in a game like this with modularity and decks big elsewise, I hope that they have more than just 2 abilities for these classes, right? 4. So 2 of these cards. So one of these cards has 1 on one side, 2 on the other, and they just give me a completely different one. Again, because otherwise you're going to find your house and you're just always going to go that same house with that same direction. And if you do the same thing every single time, the same strategy, I want some adaptability. I want some variability to go along with that. I mean, same thing with a few of these other elements of things that I, was not as fond of. With some of the wands and the brooms, for example. Again, I hope there's just more plethora of them because the variety there just wasn't that big. And so I want to see what you can do with that. The other aspect of things with some of these stats that I, mentioned about how you can get them, you know, it's okay, but that's kind of a weird worker placement spot thing. I'm not really sure, honestly, how I feel about, you know, having or needing spots below me to be open to get a stronger, you know, sort of benefit from the worker placement. It's a twist on things that I haven't seen before. So I give kudos because there's innovation there, but I'm just not sure how much I like it. I guess the other adaptability thing is, you know, having that 5th different school with the expansion that I mentioned. I'm assuming it's going to have all of these, right? It's going to have the dueling cards. It's going to have the teacher cards. It's going to have all of those. And I mean, it's fine. I like the teacher cards, but I wish there was something slightly different with them as well. I really like the fact that you can get 0 negative cards in some of those rounds. And that's cool. I really like that. That really plays off awesome. The other thing I worry about, though, at the same time is with the Mischief cards. If you go over here, some of these Mischief cards are just not created equal. And sometimes you're just going to get one that's going to be, you know, significantly more beneficial. Not just when you go to the midnight, you know, carnival, but like the actual Mischief cards, like I mentioned. Some of these, I mean, you just skip someone's turn. They just have to like wait to place their worker placement as opposed to getting to cast a spell for free. Like those are not the same. And so, I mean, that's what I worry about. And how take that is it? You may immediately place one more, you know, icon or worker, you know, beast in your turn. And some of these swapping resources, like I don't really need to swap resources. I just need more resources. Give everybody a curse card. Oh, okay. I mean, that's pretty freaking powerful compared to swapping my resources if I don't need to swap my resources. So it's stuff like that that I go, you know, kind of either go full bore into the take that and just hammer home the take that, or stay away from it almost in the worker placement. Because I think you're going to have people that are going to go, I like some of these elements, but I don't like to take that. So I'm kind of on the fence. If you're straddling the fence, you know, in any of these games, what's my answer going to be on whether or not you should get it? My answer is going to be no, it's not going to work well for you. The other element of things, and I only have like, I think there's like 5 or 6 of these wizard events. I like the rewards. I like it. It's either sum total and you have the most resources, or you just randomly draw a card and hope that your resource of that particular resource isn't less than everybody else's. So you can gather those, and that's kind of a nice thing to say. You need to prioritize that in comparison to just gathering the resource elements. But it was also like the same thing in like 3 of the events. So even though they're titled differently and there's a slight difference of the 3 that you're doing, and again, you're shuffling 4 cards because there's also a reshuffle card in there. So if you pull the reshuffle card, you just go again. So you could potentially draw the same card twice and get eliminated, you know, potentially, you know, 2 people that way. Same thing with the spells, right? With the spells on the side of the board here, the reward doesn't really change. And the resource, you know, cost changes, but the actual, you know, what the spell is, you know, giving you over here does not change. And I wish that changed as a whole. And I wish that was more modular to go with just the actual spell costs. So I really am going, okay, like why are some of these more adaptable, modular or not? And so I'm wondering if some of that is going to be in an expansion where you just slap one over the top side of the book here as opposed to the bottom side of the spell book. And yeah, I mean, the thematic incorporation is there. You've got the dueling, which again is going to be very hit or miss, because actually being in the duel is significantly better, in my opinion, than not being in the duel. As weird as that sounds. Like, I think people are worried about the take that of the duel. But yeah, I mean, it's sort of that old game conundrum, right? Of, you know, press your luck. If we both are greedy, we're both going to lose it. And it's fine, but it's also complete and utter crapshoot. And it may be a little meta in your game group, depending on who's doing it. But the allowance of sometimes what you want to do reward-wise, balanced with what you're just trying to get rid of from the curse cards, you're going to choose the curse cards. And it's not a huge victory point deduction, but there's a reason that this track I didn't show you at the bottom of this board only goes up to 18 victory points. The house scoring stuff goes up to 27, but the victory points, you do not get as much. So when you lose 2 victory points at the end, potentially, I think it is, when you have the most of those curse cards, that is a lot of victory points potentially in terms of the swing and the flow of the game. And so you're going to want to get rid of those potentially more than, you know, worrying about maybe the balance. So higher risk, higher reward, higher or more easier to score victory points. I mean, this is going to be very tight, very low scoring. Are you a fan of that, right? Or do you prefer your Euro worker placement with your scores of 174 to 153 to 96? I'm the 96 there, by the way. I'm the one that gets lapped on the board every time. That's me. And the resources, the management of the workers, it's all fine. The beasts, again, are fine. You get them, you use them, you manipulate them. You can spy on these events, which allows you to pick which one it is. But again, I wish there was more of these events, of the spells themselves. I mean, that's, when you think of Harry Potter, you think of magical beasts, you think of the dueling, but you think of more, personally speaking, of the Quidditch and the spells. And these spells are a little bit lackluster to me. The prophecies, again, are okay, but which prophecy you draw when is going to be completely a crapshoot. And so some of them are going to be fine, and some of them are just going to be, again, meh. And that's kind of a little bit anticlimactic as a whole. Does it feel Harry Potterish? Does it feel Wizarding World-ish? Yeah, absolutely. It definitely incorporates those themes, just like a Nemesis does with the Alien vibe, right? No one's going to call it Alien, but everyone calls it Alien the board game. And this is going to be, obviously, with those comparisons of all of the elements that I said, you've got your teachers that I can allude to, right? You've got your brooms, you've got your wizard events, you've got your spells, you've got the teachers that love and hate the classes and the houses and the house points and all of those things, and the dueling and the sneaking out at bedtime. So yeah, I mean, thematically, it's all there and you'll recognize it. But the question is it more nostalgia for you because you're trying to have a game with that? Or are these elements in particular a great fit for you? And then lastly is, the brooms and the wands. I didn't really feel, again, hopefully there's more variety at the end game result, because you have 4 of them and then 4 of them. So you're getting some stars, you're getting a slight variation there. Again, how you do that, can you get more stats in there? Can you get more spellcast? I'm hopeful for a few more because this is, again, a prototype. So where does that leave me? How do I feel about things? I mean, I liked it, but I wasn't over the moon with it because of those issues. It flows smoothly. It's intuitive. It's not hard to do that. But a few of those elements, like the spells, was a little anticlimactic. The dueling was okay, but, are you dueling more for the reward, or are you dueling more to avoid the penalty, was really more of the choice. The animals, the mythic beasts, are really the highlight of things. They are the best part of the workers. I almost wish I just had a worker situation of all beasts with all powers. Right? Because, everybody in your house is unique, and having a little bit more asymmetry with these guys would really be even better. Again, the stats are fine. They play into multiple elements that are linked together. But the wizarding events for me are a little lackluster of just kind of drawing a card and you're eliminated for low, which makes sense. But it's, kind of like if all the wizarding events in Harry Potter were like, okay, let's all just play paper, scissors, rock instead to see who wins. You'd be like, shouldn't there be some skill involved with that? Again, not going to say that there was in the movies or the books by any means, right? Because Harry Potter just gets thrown in regardless of his skill. And that's maybe what you're going with more here. But the rest of the wizards in the Tri-Wizard Cup, right? They were all because they were the best of the best, and their skills got them to where they were, and their skills got them some of those wins. And so that's what I'd like to see on that thematic incorporation element of things as well. Similarly with the duels. I mean, you can bet energy. You can have some of that going on with some of these other events that you're using more at the 4-player count. But I wish more were more dynamic in that way. What is the solo mode going to do? What is the expansion and the modularity going to offer? I don't know. I would be interested to see if it changes a few of those elements where my criticisms are in the same place. I do like the going to bed thing, getting more energy. It is the fastest way to replenish things. And then, balancing out with the Mischief cards, because these Midnight City elements balance with the Mischief. There really is a benefit to doing this. You don't get nearly as much energy, but you're going to get things like the Prophecy card and resources. You're going to get a bunch of stars. You're going to end up with, good stuff that makes it worth it too. So that's another probably high element with the mythic beasts. So those are my thoughts on Foxpaw. Hopefully this is helpful. Let me know what you want to know, or you have any questions, comments, or concerns down below. Thanks for watching. Godot Games, thank you for sending Foxpaw to me. And stay classy. Subscribe. Should have said that earlier in the video. I always forget about saying that anyway. Have a great freaking fantastic day. Peace out.